Hello and welcome. It has now been a week since Nintendo announced the Switch 2 in their first look trailer. I thought I would go through the announcement, all of the rumors, and put my point of view on it. I also have a few things to say that I don't feel like other videos have sort of communicated that well. So before starting, who am I? Why should you listen to me? This is after all the first video on this channel, so if it just turned up out of nowhere, then, who am I? Well, I'm just a bloke living in Sweden, and that's pretty much it. So bring it back to the topic of today's video. I've been awaiting a new Nintendo console for the best part of 2024, since I have now fallen in love with Nintendo in my adult age. And when the leaks started coming this November, I was excited as hell, as I can finally be part of the community of a new Nintendo launch. And all the leaks just made me more and more excited. It hasn't destroyed the wonder in my opinion. I don't think I would be this excited if the leaks never happened. So we're finally caught up. The Nintendo Switch 2 was announced on Thursday morning, the 16th of January in the Americas, and in the early afternoon for me living in Sweden. A lot of people were expecting this, but I've seen people hoping for something more to be shown in the announcement other than just a Switch first look. But I got exactly what I was expecting. Some people had theorized that no games were going to be co-announced. I mainly saw some leaks about it releasing 3 colorways, being black, grey and a Mario Kart version, and with Mario Kart 9 of course. I also saw people saying a big no to Mario Kart 9, as there wouldn't be any new Mario games until Christmas 2025, or later this year. So what was actually shown in the video, and what are we still awaiting to be announced in further detail? Well, all the physical features of how the console looked was spot on. Some companies even had a full color render of the device shown on their website a week or two before Nintendo's video. I couldn't help but literally laugh out loud when I saw it for the first time, because it was just exactly the same. Some notable features being a bigger screen of approximately 8 inches if you compare it to the Switch 1 in the video, dual USB-C ports for easier charging when in handheld or with the kickstand expanded, a headphone jack, still a big thing in this day and age, as well as a magnetic connection system for the Joy-Cons. It also has a similar kickstand to the Switch 1 OLED, but in a U shape instead of being half the backplate. Taking a closer look at the Joy-Cons, there's an extra button on the right under the home button, and on both of them there seems to be a mouse sensor next to the bigger shoulder buttons in split mode. And the intention for the sensor is highly likely to be a mouse-like feature, since you can see the Joy-Cons sliding around on the floor with the lanyards as tails. It also seems like the split mode bumper cover from the Switch 1 is more open. What I mean by that is the bumper on the Switch 1 added bigger shoulder buttons on top of the really small ones if you didn't have that cover. This should mean that you can use it in split mode more comfortably, even if you lose a strap or bumper cover. They also showed off a few seconds of Mario Kart, which technically wasn't announced but sort of just teased. And to go on a little bit of a tangent about that, here's what I think about it. Some people are confused if this is just a new track for Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, but in my strong opinion it is not. This is the next Mario Kart game. It might be called something else, but it is a new entry to the series. Some people have also said that they don't think it looks that impressive compared to 8, and I agree. However, I don't think it needs to look any better. 8 looks beautiful to this day, even if it's like 7 or 8 years old now. Everything looks really smooth and the game works really well in my opinion. So what is new with this entry? Well, some things. The track showcased is called Mario Bros Circuit and seems to be themed after the desert Route 66, similar to Radiator Springs from Pixar's Cars. The track seems to be wider than previous entries, but I think that's to compensate for the insane 24 racer grid you can see at the start line. This is maybe also where the extra performance from the Switch 2 is going when it comes to at least Mario Kart. It may not look better, but if there are 24 players all using items at the same time, that's gonna need some serious hardware upgrades. Other things that are new are the boost panels that look different and may work different, and there seems to be something under the Yoshi Diner or fuel station. It's hard to see what it is, but I guess we'll have to wait and see on that one. The second to last thing that was showcased at the end of the teaser was backwards compatibility. I have heard that some people don't really know how this is going to work and that this isn't really common for Nintendo to do. I on the other hand think it's really on brand for Nintendo. I think they always have backwards compatibility in mind where they can manage to do it. In the early days, tech was advancing fast, so there wasn't really a good way to do this, but this changed with the introduction of the optical disc on the GameCube. This made it so on the next console, the Wii, that also used optical discs, could play GameCube games. This was also at the time very easy because the Wii basically used a beefed up version of the GameCube CPU with some other enhancements. So GameCube games could be run natively by just turning some cores off, turning it into an exact CPU used on the GameCube. Something very similar was also done on the Nintendo DS. You could play Game Boy games on that. I think it came down to the same concept of very similar hardware. Now we have the Switch 2, and the hardware isn't as unique as it was back in the day. Everything now is basically just running an x86 architecture as a small PC. I think this makes it easy for third parties to port games to the Switch, and in this case port Switch 1 games to the Switch 2. I think the main games that are not going to work are the ones that are not ported by the developer from the eShop, and games like Nintendo Labo, which work in a very specific way for the Switch 1. So what is yet to be announced? The first thing not announced are the actual hardware specifications of the processor inside, and also the screen, but we'll get to that. Other thing is the mouse feature that I talked about earlier, and also no games have been announced, only Mario Kart 9 has been teased. The release date of the Switch 2 is rumored to be in June or July, but seeing the dates for the hands-on experiences around the world sneak into June makes it more likely to be a July release. So what are people concerned about? Well, these are the things I've heard so far. Game compatibility, which I've already talked about. The price, especially why you should pay possibly $400 for a console that is very similar to the original Switch. The Joy-Con's connection slot is colored the same way as the controllers. How will this hold up when buying different colored Joy-Cons? Will it just be mismatched, or is there something else going on? And I don't really know. And the one I've seen most is about the connection port that connects the Joy-Cons to the console itself. People fear that the port on the console side will be a point of failure. I want to talk about this last point first, since it's the most discussed online right now. I don't think that this will be a problem. I think they've thought this through. Compared to the launch of the OG Switch, with all the problems and some that still consist to this day with the rail system, I, however, think that this part will not break, unless you put your fat fingers in there and wiggle it loose. I mean, the connection is pretty much a large USB port if you really look at it closely. So, I have a phone with a USB charging port, and if you look closely to it, I don't think you can really see it that much. There we go. There is a small part in there that you can sort of wiggle loose. But when you put your USB cable in there, you see, if it isn't straight, it doesn't go in. It doesn't even touch the port or the part inside. Unless you have it straight and push it in, that's when it makes contact. And this makes it so you can't really wiggle it loose because it's stuck in there. And I think this is how the Nintendo port will work for the Joy-Cons. Now let's go back to point 2, with the pricing and why you should buy this console if you already own the OG Switch. I don't think hardware has ever been a selling point for Nintendo. The hardware is usually the medium that makes it possible to play their games. And to make better and more expansive games, you are going to eventually need to upgrade the hardware your games are running on. So if you're happy to play all of the titles released on the OG Switch, then that's fine. But think about what Nintendo was able to do for that hardware and how beautiful their own games looked on it. And now think what will be possible with the Switch 2. If we get a new mainline Zelda, for example, it's going to be gorgeous as hell. And as I also stated earlier, it's not only about graphical fidelity, but about how big you want your game to be. Stronger hardware means that it's going to be able to handle more factors such as effects and complexity in games. And that's the point that I'm excited to see. What can this thing truly do when Nintendo optimizes their games for it? So internals and specifications. Let's take a look what's actually inside this thing. The leak so far has shed some light on this. The CPU/GPU, or the chip, seems to be an Nvidia Tegra T239 made by Samsung on an 8 or 5 nanometer architecture. This seems to make the Switch 2 perform similar to the PlayStation 4 and slightly better than the Valve Steam Deck. These are just speculations. Handheld versus docked performance will be different. This means the Switch 2 will have over 1500 CUDA cores, compared to the Switch 1's 256 CUDA cores. It also seems to have 12 GB of LPDDR5X memory clocked at 7500 megatransfers per second, compared to the Switch 1's 4 GB of 1600 megatransfers. It literally looks like 10 times faster, and it needs to be if we are believed to have a higher resolution screen at 1080p compared to 720 on the first one. There's also rumored to be able to upscale to 4K using DLSS when docked to a TV. My wishes is that this will all be at 60 Hz or FPS. Conclusions. So that sums up pretty much everything I've heard or noticed in the first week of the Nintendo Switch 2. As I stated earlier, I am super excited and I will probably talk more about future updates of the Switch 2. The next big thing, if no more leaks come to light, is the Nintendo Direct held at April the 2nd. I will probably be watching it live on my Twitch channel called The Daddy Co. I'll leave a link in the description. If you want to give me some company, a follow would be appreciated as I do play some casual games on there, and also so you can join me and watch the event. Also, feel free to like the video if you liked it, dislike it if you didn't, and please comment if there's anything I missed, or if you have any thoughts on what I've said. But with that said, your daddy will not keep you any longer. Hej då!